So with the DNC having concluded, we thought we would zoom out a little bit, look at who got speaking time, who didn't, and what that potentially says about the state of the party. Who better to do all of that with than Team Rising?
That's right. They're finally back, folks. Joining us now, Republican strategist, fellow with the National Security Institute, Lauren Claffey, and Democratic strategist, founding partner of Northern Star Strategies, Michael Starr Hopkins himself. We have missed you guys immensely. It's great to see you. Thanks for joining us.
So nice to see you guys' faces. Thanks for being with us.
I've missed you guys so much more.
We're in the Zoom boxes, but it's okay. Michael, let's start with you. We have a little bit of a graphic that our team whipped up. Let's throw that up there on the screen about the amount of speaking time that different candidates or different speakers received at the DNC, which we're just now coming off of. Of course, Joe Biden, President Obama, Nancy Pelosi, and them got more. But you can actually see here what we've been talking a lot here about is that many within the GOP actually got more speaking time than some of the up-and-coming, more progressive candidates, say, like AOC. What's your take on that? I mean, you were skeptical of that wing of the party during the primary. Now that the DNC has happened, do you think that it was overall a successful event, or do you think there should have been more representation?
Well, I think that the convention was insanely successful for Democrats, but I do think Democrats missed an opportunity to show how deep our bench is. You know, we're always chasing this unicorn of, disillusioned Republicans that are somehow going to come back to the party and vote with us. It's not happened before, and I really just don't believe it's going to happen. What we need to do is turn out our base. We need to turn out those AOC supporters, that Warren crowd, the progressives. And so I think we missed a chance to do that.
I want to hug you right now because I completely agree. And listen, putting the ideology aside, I think you're right. It's a missed opportunity because, Lauren, if you look at the polls that we've been covering closely here, the places where Biden is underperforming Hillary is among young voters, is among those working class Latino voters in particular who were very energized by Bernie Sanders' campaign. And so the New York Times has a great graphic, goes through who got speaking time and does it in this really pretty visual way. And it just becomes, the establishment is overwhelmingly represented. But there were more Republicans, John Kasich and Meg Whitman and all these Republicans from the 90s actually outnumbered the people from the progressive wing of the party.
Yeah, I think that's because you're looking at a campaign that's heavily focused on Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, a lot of these states that are, you're looking at voters that voted for Obama, switched to Trump, and then now Biden's looking to take them back. These working class white voters that'll make a difference in these battleground states. I think that's why you saw in the convention the Democrats focusing a little bit more on center-right, disillusioned Republicans, because that's going to be key to them winning this election this time around. Turnout for the base is always important, but what's going to make a difference in the Electoral College is going to be those types of voters.
Yeah, but with respect, John Kasich doesn't appeal to the white working class.
That's what I was going to say. I was like, Lauren, I don't think John Kasich, the guy who got zero votes from Trump voters, is going to be swinging any Obama-Trump person back.
You'd be better off with Sherrod Brown, who's from the same state, who's a populist union labor guy, wins in a state, Michael, that's still, that has leaned really to the right, and Biden may have a chance to win it this time around. But, even if that's your theory of the case, look, they've clearly decided that the voter that they really want to go after is this sort of white suburban moderate. That's what the whole convention was geared towards. Now, I think it can work out, but I think to your point, it's a bit of a risk, frankly.
It is. We're consistently chasing these Republicans rather than trying to excite our base. And just on a principled issue, I had a problem with Mike Bloomberg speaking at the convention. Mike Bloomberg promised those workers that he was going to pay them until the end of the election cycle. And then once he got out, he reneged on his promise, and a bunch of 22, 23-year-old campaign workers who had moved all over the country were left with no job and, for a while, no health care. And that's not what the Democratic Party stands for. So I had a real problem with him speaking.
Yeah, I think it's a great point, which is that it's ironic, too, Lauren, because he was talking, he was like, Trump stiffed his contractors, all of that, which is true. Not going to deny it here. And it's like, dude, you just stiffed yours. You promised to spend $1 billion and so much more. I want to go back to that idea, though, just about, your conversations and others. I have seen, it's funny that the Democrats in the Biden campaign seem to think that, having John Kasich speak and some Republican congressman from the 90s is going to switch any Republicans. I mean, all the Republicans I know in D.C., even the more establishment ones, are like, look, we left John Kasich back a very, very long time ago.
Yeah, I mean, you hear that a lot from the voters on the trail. They're like, oh, if they're a CNN commentator, they're not a real Republican anymore. That's kind of like that's kind of the base thing. But listen, I think the Democrats have taken whatever Republicans they could get to speak at their convention. It's not like there was a ton of them.
Mm-hmm.
And Michael, the other piece that we wanted to bring up here is historically, traditionally, candidates who participate in the primary and win delegates get a speaking slot. There's a very noteworthy person who was left out of that equation this time around. That would be Tulsi Gabbard. And what's interesting to me, too, about this here is that she actually, when she got out of the race, very quickly lined up behind Joe, got in full-throated behind him. There was suddenly, they went straight from she's an Assad toady and she's Kremlin agent and all this stuff to, she's a patriot and we love her and she's amazing. But I guess it wasn't enough to earn her even, the minute that AOC got at the DNC. Andrew Yang, another kind of anti-establishment candidate who's also endorsed against some Democratic incumbents, had to basically shame them into allowing him to be able to participate. What do you make of that dynamic?
Yeah, I've been very critical of Tulsi Gabbard, but you're right. I mean, she did win delegates, and historically, winning delegates means you get a speaking slot. Now, her critiques and how critical she's been of the Democratic Party, I think, obviously contributed to her not getting a speaking role. But it'll be interesting to see moving forward what role she plays in the party, if any at all.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting, too. I was thinking about it, too, Lauren, just in the context of next week for the RNC, which is that I'm looking at many of the people who, Ted Cruz, Tom Cotton, Josh Hawley, many of these other people who have even, Marco Rubio, the ones who bowed to Trump even in 2016, they don't have speaking slots. They've gone so far with Nikki Haley, Kristi Noem, Tim Scott, and Joni Ernst so far. So it's not just a DNC phenomenon this time around.
No, and I think, the RNC is going to be interesting because they're giving so much time to people who are going to be highlighting the impact of policies in their communities, like these First Amendment rights, the Second Amendment rights, the media bias, all these things, all of these kind of social cultural issues that Trump's been highlighting throughout this campaign season and frankly throughout his administration. They're really relying more heavily on people to tell those stories than they are any sort of establishment party members. So I think that's going to be an interesting dynamic, too, because that's really what they've been hyping. It's not the party, but the people that have been experiencing these things.
Yeah, well, grievance politics, of course, always successful whenever it comes to elections.
And
but
if you're Marco
Rubio,
I just got to say, I don't know if you even want to be at the convention. If you're an establishment Republican, I think you want to stay as far away from the convention as possible.
Oh, well, I would disagree with you on that, my friend. But we're going to come up next. We're going to get your guys' analysis on the state of the race. Thanks for joining us, and we'll be right back after this.